Hey everybody, welcome to Mice Gaming Gala. We're doing something a little different tonight. For those of you who are regulars watching the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast, we're taking a break this week, but I'm live. I'm keeping the seat warm, and we've got a really interesting topic today. I'm also trying out. I've had this mic for a long time, but I'm trying it out. So if the audio's not good, let me know. I figured I'd try it here instead of on a podcast with Phil and Brian. Um, so if it isn't good, it's only on my channel. It's not screwing up Phil's channel. Um, I'm going to first bring in my guest, and then I'm going to introduce our topic. You know him from the channel Game Closet. He does videos on video gaming stuff from the Atari 2600 all the way through modern day. It's often informative. It's always entertaining. It is our friend, Dr. Scott. How's it going?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great evening. I feel a little giddy right now. I don't know why.
Oh, good. Um, yeah, so this is something a little different. Um, I A lot of people won't realize it, but I do play modern games. You would think by my channel that I'm only playing like Atari or Intellivision or NES, but I do play modern games. And so I am not as well versed in modern games. My particularly my PS5 and my Xbox Series X kind of sit, um, but I do play modern games. And so recently saw a video from a friend of the channel, Zenbloke, who's actually in the chat. And you
Yes,
know
he
what?
is.
I would have sent him an invite. Actually, Zen, if it is because I know it's like 1 a.m. in Scotland right now. Um, I just sent you emailed you a StreamYard like if you want to hop on. No pressure. Um,
I gotta go
but
to
he
bed. Are you kidding?
but he did a video recently on kind of the modern um, video game scene and how it's lacking creativity. It's stuck in a rut. Um, so I thought that would be a great topic here because it kind of falls outside of what we usually do on the Retro Bliss Rewind.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to do is I have taken um, a little snippet of his video. If you want to check out his video, he's a Zenbloke at Zenbloke on YouTube. The video that we're talking about is called "In a Rut" or "Stuck in a Rut."
And it will
Um,
make you hungry too. So it's all
it,
his
it
fault.
will. By the end of that video, you will definitely be wanting some fried potato.
Yeah.
I'm going to play. It's about a minute 40, and that's our conversation starter, and then we'll get into it. So here, let's take a look at Zen's video.
I know why the games industry is in the rut it's in. And you're going, dude, it's in a rut? But we're getting all these amazing games. We're getting all these things that look spectacular. We're getting all these things that just like push the boundaries. Do they really? Do they really push the boundaries? Do you know what it was like 30 years ago when PlayStation started? That was pushing the boundaries. When we started to get the true 3D games with real polygonal models and real FMV, CD based gaming really was the big push that started the ball really rolling. And PS2 came out in 2000, 25 years ago, and just went boom, and everything went, oh my god. Then gaming really took off. Where here we are in PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles and PCs going ah, and Steam Decks, and like we're on the verge of the Nintendo Switch 2, and games admittedly look pretty spanky, but that's all there is. Realistically speaking, a lot of the time, all we've got now is really lovely looking games, but not a lot of creativity. Most of the creativity is happening in the indie space.
Yep.
All
Absolutely.
right. So Hey,
Hey!
Zenblo.
Hey, there he is.
Hello,
Yeah.
all the people that love these two other people.
Yeah, so that's just a snippet. Like we said before, now that Zen's here, I gotta repeat it. If you watch that full video, by the end of the video, you're gonna want some kind of fried potato product. He's got
Hey,
an
I'm
analogy.
I'm Scottish. We know how to fry stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Because like even when he was talking about it, I was like, I know the kind of chips he's talking about, because here in our hemisphere we would call them steak fries. Great big
Oh, the
wide wedges,
wedges.
and
Yeah.
just crisp and lovely and hot. And I always there's an episode of Doctor Who. I I want to say it was
Tenant.
it wasn't no, it was actually Eccleston, where they end up
Oh,
back.
when Rose gets the chips. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she goes, I smell chips. I want chips. And he goes, I don't have any money, So and I'm like,
Well,
yep, that's it.
my ex was English, so I'm familiar with all of that. And I've been to Scotland, and you made me miss stovies. I haven't had stovies in like 10 years. So
Oh,
anyhow, about the topic.
by the way, sorry for
Um,
the lighting. There's kitchen lights up there, and I'm here. Sorry, dude.
oh, no worries, no worries. So and Mr. Basement says rubbish 2600
2600
forever.
forever.
I know certainly people from my channel probably chuckle when you're talking about how PlayStation got the ball rolling, and then PS2, that's when we really started getting going. But you guys have to realize too that Atari and Nintendo were not the forces in the UK that they were in North America.
Right.
I mean, they were here, but
They were certainly there, but
we dealt more with the microcomputers like the Commodore 16, the Acorn Alexa, and stuff like that to talk it to your guys' level of retro loveliness.
yeah, yes, yeah. If you watch a lot of British and European in general YouTubers about retro gaming, it's a lot about like the ZX Spectrum or like
Yeah,
the little microcomputers.
and like the Amstrad and the other stuff like that. I mean, yeah, there's a whole different thing. I mean, even like on your side of the planet, I mean, you guys call it the Sega Genesis. We call it the Mega Drive.
Mega Drive, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
actually saw my first Mega Drive in person today. And I was like, oh, because like my buddy John, who owns Rock'em Sock'em Retro here in Bowling Green, Ohio,
Mhm.
he took a trade, and he had a couple of games sitting there. I go, wait a minute, these are EverDrive, or I mean, these are Mega Drive games. I turn around, and there's one he took it on trade. I go, a Mega Drive, and I know it's a Genesis, but it's not. It's not the same thing. It's like
It's PAL.
yeah, and I'm like,
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. PAL over NTSC.
I put my hands on it. And I go, this is so cool. So
I used to work in, well, I still work in television, but obviously we used to be the old video formats, and we used to always say NTSC stood for never the same color. So
I heard that.
anyhow, the topic of the evening is about creativity and innovation in modern gaming. Are we stuck in a rut? We've kind of already heard at least the intro to it from Zen. Scott, why don't you start us off with your thoughts?
Well, and as I had mentioned to Mike earlier, because he sent me the link to your video, you had some great points there, and I do agree. I think that there are some definite examples of indie developers who are, let's take this in a different direction, and it's not so much just because they don't have the cash that the larger companies have. I think that does play into it, because they do have to be a little more creative. And it's not so much that, because there are some great games out there that are not, the gorgeous games, as you were saying, that there are some that have a more 8-bit or 16-bit look to them and feel to them. And so those are games that are very specific to where those developers are placing them in time. I guess, for lack of a better way of putting them. But just for an example, I played this game last year, Stray, and it is out for the PS5. then it later on came out for the Xbox Series and all that. But not only is it a beautiful game, it's very, very creative. And I'm number one, I don't play turn-based RPGs or anything, and that's not what this is by any means. But uh, you play as a cat, and then you eventually pick up this little robot companion B12, and you're in this. It's not necessarily a dystopian world, but it's it's kind of a cyberpunk kind of world, where these robots are kind of trapped in this dome city. And by the end of the game, I won't give it away. By the end of the game, you've explored most or all of this city. There's got some beautiful music, some great art, some great artwork in the game, because it is art. Video games are art. And I fell in love with this cat. I'm usually the kind of guy who's just blowing things away and shooting stuff. There was no blowing things up in this game. There was no first person shooting or going around shooting, my buddies and my friends or people online. It was just me and this little robot, and just exploring this city, solving a few problems, helping people on the go, listening to some great music, and I had an absolute blast. And I know it's because the folks who made this game, they gave a damn. They actually cared about the craft that they have there, and about the game that they were producing.
I have to say, I played that game myself a while ago. I absolutely adored it. I love the pure escapism of it.
Yeah.
And that's what gaming's supposed to be. It's supposed to be, we can escape life for a little bit, be anything else. Man, woman, cat, alien, a viscous blob of goo that just happens to be intelligent. The whole point is the journey, the story, the experience. And that Stray is one of those beautiful games that actually tries to do something new and something different, even just in the way that you converse with the other entities, the robots who have become sentient. Although I think there might be some of the robots who are actually engram copies of humans that had lived a long time ago. I don't think they're all AI. I think some of them are actually once people, because the way that they sort of have human interactions, even though they're technically machines, I think it leads to that. But that might be a bit more the sort of metaphysical side of things. But the fact of the matter is, it's a beautiful game. It's beautifully done, and it's not a AAA studio.
No.
I forget the name of the company that made it, but
I don't have my reading glasses right now. But there it is, guys. If you want to read it, I can't.
Annapurna.
Annapurna, yeah, they're not a AAA studio, but they do, as you say, good work.
Right,
and I thoroughly love that game. I played the PS5 version. My son played the PS4 version, but he couldn't complete it.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this is if you do have a PS5, you pop that in, and the upgrade is free. And
upscales, yeah.
Yeah, and I played the PS4 version before I got the PS5. And I will throw this out there for anybody watching. There is a review on my channel, and if you follow my channel at all, prepare to laugh. It is one of those videos, and I've told Mike this 100 times. It's one of those videos that I really put a lot of love into, because it's one of my more, wouldn't say epic videos, but one of the ones that I just put so much into it. And there's a lot of thought and a lot of fun and a lot of funny in it. And it doesn't get any views. It just does. If I do a top 10 of something, it gets tons of views. If I do
it always hurts.
It gets nothing. But I also, on my alternate channel that I just launched about a month ago, Dr. Scott's Game Vault. If you'd like to watch the full playthrough, that's also on there. If you don't feel like playing the game, it is something that I could sit back and watch somebody else play it. It's just because it's that entertaining. It is that, like you said, it's great escapism. And it took me away from where I live, and it's not like I live in a terrible, horrible place, but it got me out of the four walls that I'm in, and I got to fantasize about being this cat, and I just loved playing it. It's so great. I could go on all night about just that game.
Well, we don't want you to.
No.
we but you mentioned too, so part of Zen's video and part of what he's talking about is that the innovation wasn't coming from the AAA. And I think a big part of that is it's very similar to Hollywood, where if you're going to go and you're going to take risks, um, you're not going to take a risk on something that costs millions of dollars and takes like 5 years to produce. Um, like it's same with the film. People complain, oh, another Marvel movie, another Star Wars movie, oh, another Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones. Is there no originality? There's plenty of originality. The originality is just not getting greenlit because you have a established name and that'll put butts in seats. You have established actors that'll put butts in seats.
There is a point to be made, however, when it comes to the movies and the audience they're in, and the audience to most any other form of intellectual property and the media that supports it. Whenever the Marvel movies have tried to do something a little bit different, like take Thor: Love and Thunder, that movie was a departure from the entire way that the four movies had been handled. I mean, you look at the Thor: The Dark World and Thor: The original movie, and the way that Thor was presented in the Avengers films, the way he was in Love and Thunder was so different, so much fun, and I loved how Taika Waititi treats Thor, especially in Ragnarok. You know, the way that he does it is brilliant, but the audience didn't get behind those movies as much. So there is a little bit of the audience expectation, but then it also could be argued in counterpoint that the audience has been trained not to like new things.
Possibly. I think the thing with Thor: Love and Thunder is, again, the people going to see it are fans of the previous Thor movies. You're not by that movie, you're not getting new people like, oh, I'm going to start with Thor now.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be very divisive if it's drastically different. And I think you've seen the same in some video games. Like, Lord knows, when it was Call of Duty this and Call of Duty that, and I had zero interest in it from almost the get-go. But it was popular, so they kept producing them. Because executives, again, I work in film and television, and I can tell you from experience that executives are the least creative people on the planet. They're looking at numbers. They're looking at, okay, I need a sure thing. And again, in a AAA situation, if you don't have at least what you think is a sure thing, you risk putting your company in danger. And it's not that, and I would say new things are good. I agreed with Lloyd here. And it's just hard to tell what new thing is actually going to work. Like if Star Wars didn't exist and George Lucas came up to us and pitched Star Wars, I would like to think that all of us would share his vision. But if it's, okay, here's my idea, there's a robot companion and it only beeps and it talks to its effeminate robot friend while it walks around the desert and tries to find this guy who's the son of a space wizard, finds another space wizard, blows up a evil space station against his robot father, and uses this mystical thing to do it and saves a princess, we'd probably laugh him out of there, or at least say, hey, I'd love to see it. It'd be really cool to see, but I'm not putting my money behind it.
Yeah, almost any property you mentioned, you could do that with. I mean, if you were to do that with Dune, you've got these warring families that have been at war with each other for thousands of years, with genetic manipulation, and space folding and giant worms, and the people behind the desk who are looking at you for the film picture would go, "Are you high?"
Yep. And like I remember seeing recently, and this is, I'm a huge Back to the Future fan. I never knew this, but there was an executive that keep trying to get them to change the name to Man from Pluto. And like when he goes in and says, "I'm Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan," he's like, make him say he's a man from Pluto. Make the science fiction novel that his dad writes, Man from Pluto, and that'll be the tie-in and all this. And it's so in an environment where you don't know what ideas will work, it's easier for indie developers and small budgets to take those risks than it is for a AAA. And
Yeah, they can be more
I think
nimble.
the gaming industry has gotten so bloated that like you look at the credits at the end of a film and it's hundreds of people.
Oh yeah.
And now make that interactive, right? And so it's
Yeah.
such a big investment that it's almost like we've created a situation with these guys being so big that the innovation can never come from these guys.
Well, one of the examples that I gave to you via text when we were when you invited me to be on the show, one of my absolute favorite games of all time, and my wife and I we play this game fairly regularly even now. And no, I'm not talking about Halo because that is one of the other ones we play very regularly. But we play the Rainbow Six series, and this is Rainbow Six Vegas 2. This is our favorite, and there's other ones in the series before this that I also like Lockdown and Raven Shield. But Rainbow Six Vegas 1 and 2 are and that's Ubisoft, and we love these games. And I had said to you that, and I've said this a dozen times to many friends, if Ubisoft right now, or Ubisoft, however you want to pronounce it, if they were to come out with a remaster of that right now, and if they made it where you could play all of the maps, everything. I mean, this game's like, 16 or 17 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
And if it had all of the maps, and if you could make both, because both of them are slightly different, especially when you're playing Terrorist Hunt, if you could turn the respawn on or off, so that way you could respawn, because you can't respawn in Terrorist Hunt in 1, but you can in 2 if you get killed up to 3 times. That would be great. I'd plop down $100 right now, and right now somebody Ubisoft's going $100. But then they came out with, and then they were supposed to come out with Rainbow Six Patriots. That never happened. And then they came out with this piece of crap. And Rainbow Six Siege, I know that there's an audience out there for it, but the audience is not as big as the people who wanted this, because a great deal of the people who played these and all the games before it will not be playing this, because this is online only. It's an MMO, and it doesn't have a campaign whatsoever. There's no terrorist hunt. Well, you'd say, well, you're all hunting terrorists. No, it's not the same thing. And most of this audience has been completely and utterly alienated, because these guys are trying to chase the online dollar, which is running out. This company is very, very close to breaking up and being sold off in pieces. And they just released this past week, and I'm not going to get into a debate about that game either, because there are people who like it and there's a lot of people who don't. The history behind it, we're not even going to get into that. But they're betting everything they've got on the new Assassin's Creed right now. And the Assassin's Creed games have become so they have saturated the market just as much as Call of Duty has.
Used to be one of my favorites.
Yeah, and
I still love the Assassin's Creed games. I've played most every single one except for the 2.5D jobbies and Rogue. I just can't get behind the idea of being, of the Order and playing a game.
Origins I thought was good, and Origins was the last one that I actually played. I didn't buy Valhalla. And
I completed Valhalla. I'm a nutcase. I got both endings.
I've heard it's very good, but for me personally, I'm not that much of a fan of the entire series. I will poke here and there and play a couple of them. I have most of them, but I think the series itself kind of got tired. That's how come I didn't come back. But if you want to take an IP that somebody actually said, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we finally make a proper game for this movie?" There have been some that have had crossovers, like RoboCop versus the Terminator. But when this game came out, RoboCop Rogue City, oh my God, they did this properly.
Yeah, when
And
you were in the police station, you felt like you were in the police station from the films. And even
yeah,
though you've never set foot in that place, you knew where to go. It
it
was
was
spooky.
familiar. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And it's like, well, I go downstairs. I have to go downstairs to get to my
yeah.
car, and that's where the garage is.
And there was Cecil, and it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, they did it proper, and that's because somebody actually cared. And
Here's
they
a question, though. Here's a
yeah.
question, and I'm not denying that people care. Um, and a part of this is playing devil's advocate. I would argue. So in the gameplay, I have not played RoboCop Rogue City. I'm sad to say, I'm a RoboCop fan. Um, and for
And
those
the
of you who
sequel
haven't,
will be out in June.
yeah. But is there anything new gameplay wise in there?
Not really.
No,
Not
I mean it's very much I wouldn't call it an on rails shooter, but
no.
there's definitely a golden path to pursue.
Mhm.
But there's loads of
Because
collectibles slit about. But
It's
yeah, I mean
definitely
it's very much an A to B story.
it's definitely linear. It's
so
very linear.
I look at that and I say, in terms of kind of like the topic that we've got here,
Original, not
lots
so
of
original.
lots of care with a tried and true property, a tried and true format, so to minimize risks.
I
And
mean,
now you
from
can do
sorry.
that really, really well. And that's the type of thing that, like, video games are 100% art. They are an art form. They are a form of interactive art. And especially now compared to 40, 50 years ago, um, they are story vessels.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Um,
about a year and a half ago, I made a video describing the argument for why video games are art, and I
yes,
like to think I made a good case of it. I completely agree with you, Mike.
they're 100% art. Like, take a movie and make it interactive, especially with the way that they are today. Um, like, and we, Scott, you were on our podcast on the Retro Bliss Rewind, when we were talking about, our games better then or now, and I made the point that, if you're a parent, uh, Last of Us brought you to tears, and show me a game other than Atari 2600 Pac-Man that brings anybody to tears from back then. Like, games have evolved,
Uh,
and that quiver of air, like, if you think of game mechanics and ways of doing things like a quiver of arrows, that quiver has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and it only expands over the years. But the innovations, there are big innovations and there are small innovations, and I find that they come in waves. So when Space Invaders first came out, it was innovative. It was the first arcade game that wasn't a set time. You could just play and play and play until you died. It was the first one screen shooter game.
Hang on a
It
second, just gonna
was,
meet guys.
yep. It was first one screen shooter game. And what happened right after Space Invaders came out? There were tons and tons of Space Invader clones, and then there were small innovations, um, and big innovations based on that format. It was still a single screen shooter, but you got Galaga, you got Galaxian, you got Demon Attack and Phoenix, and all these other games that are based or at least inspired by Space Invaders. And then Pac-Man comes out, and there's a big, oh my god, maze games. And then you get Ladybug, and you get Lock and Chase, and you get these in waves, and there are small evolutions that come after it. I would argue that Ladybug is 10 times the game that Pac-Man is. I love Ladybug.
I can agree with that.
Um,
I like Mousetrap better too.
And so it's really one of those situations where I I would probably, I mean, at least from my perspective, I would agree that right now, AAA gaming is absolutely in a rut, just by virtue of the fact that I have little to no interest in most of it. Most of what I play now are indie games. I play them with my kids and mostly on the Switch.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah, agreed.
and and the but what'll happen is, much like what happened, like the Among Us phenomenon, or before that, the Minecraft phenomenon, is an indie developer will come up with something new and it will be super popular, and that will allow the AAA company to be comfortable. Let's use that game mechanic and incorporate it with our awesome graphics and our storytelling team and stuff like that. So I don't think we're in a situation where AAA is just forever going to be boring, but I think the innovation really needs to be driven from these smaller studios.
Well, I think a lot of the problem the AAA is having, and why they're stuck in the rut that they're in, is because they've made these games so huge that, kind of like Hollywood, bigger, better, faster,
Yep.
and it's just like, it doesn't have to be bigger, better, faster. I mean, here's a $30 game right here. And is it the best game in the world when it comes to its NPCs and stuff like that? No.
I hear it
But
has high numbers in the squirrel community.
it does. I mean, we have a huge park right next door to us, and there's a walnut grove and a lot of squirrels, and they come over asking to play the game. And I'm like, guys, no, you're filthy. Get out of here, you nasty rodents. And they flip me the bird and they leave, and that's okay. But it's my game and I'm gonna play it. I hope they don't come over with guns and force the game out of my hands. But no, but it is a very fun game. It's a very hilarious game. Um, and just like Zenblock was saying, and I'll paraphrase, just because it's giant and pretty, just because it's shiny doesn't make it great. And now that we can have these games that are so great, big, huge, and so realistic looking, it doesn't make it a better game. Not by a long shot.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Ubisoft example from before, I like a lot of Ubisoft games. I've played a lot
Yeah.
of them, and if there's one series I've played with quite a lot of, aside from Assassin's Creed, it's Far Cry. And the Far Cry
Yes.
games I've always pushed the envelope. I felt they've always tried to, do some stuff. I mean, yes, they've done the whole radio towers that have so it, and so widespread through the whole ubification of their software lineup. But I've always thought that like Far Cry was always trying to do something. But I've recently been playing through six, and I'm about two-thirds of the way through it, I reckon. And although I like the character and I really like the setting, and the story seems to be interesting. In fact, there's taken a couple of twists and turns that I thought the story was going to go zig, and it went zag, and I was happy about that. The game mechanically, I think they've taken too many odd decisions. I mean, let me put it for you this way, right? You have a weapon wheel, obviously. Now, when if you want to choose a throwable, instead of going to an outer ring of the weapon wheel or a separate part of the weapon wheel, you have to select your throwables with your D-pad while you're in the weapon wheel. It's clunky as all hell.
Mhm.
If you want to select a weapon, you have to open the weapon wheel with L2 or is it L1, I forget. Because you remember your fingers, you don't remember your head.
Right.
And the other one you use to select the gun, and then you have to double tap it to get the menu to go away. And you can so easily tap the wrong thing, and you think you've tapped the menu to go away, but what you've actually done is you've selected a different weapon. It's a horrible design, and the driving is mince. So that's a total Scottish term. It's horrible. It's crap. It's rubbish. All right. It's it's yad. It's horrible. It's put it this way, right? You hit
Is it as bad
R1
as Grand Theft Auto 4?
Grand Theft Auto 4 was realistic, And although you had the
Right.
butter tires, you learned to love it because the way the car's controlled was actually right for each car you controlled.
How
But
about
what you
the
have, what you
mongoose
get,
from Halo 1?
yeah, okay.
Wow.
But or the vehicle from Mass Effect, was it the Mako?
Oh,
Right, but here's the thing, right? So you hit R1 to accelerate. That seems fine and dandy
yeah.
in your first person perspective inside the car that you can't change. Um, but then you don't actually have a brake. What you have is reverse with R1,
Okay.
so with L1. So you can only have reverse and forward. There's no actual stop the car. So what you end up doing is you try and have a balance point between stop and reverse, and you jump out the car and hope that you don't get hurt.
Just hold the accelerator and the reverse at the same time.
I don't know if that would work because
Spin tires.
there's not like you hold R1 to gain speed. You give it taps and
Oh,
you give it
okay.
taps the other way. So I
That
don't know if that would work, but I'm willing to give it a shot. But it's just a terrible driving mechanic, and the flying mechanic for is reliant upon that, except you're in the air.
Well, and that goes to show. I mean, okay, so they changed how stuff like that works. Let's
Yeah,
talk about the weapon wheel. Weapon wheels are well established in most modern games. You uh, often with the D-pad, and then you press an extra to get to an outer ring or something like that. And just it's almost sometimes somebody's like, "Hey, I've got a great idea of how we can do this," and it's a de-evolution of
yeah.
the mechanic. And I think like a lot of particularly executives, people who can't share the vision, and that's, not being a creative person is not a bad thing. You just shouldn't be in a creative job. And I would not want somebody who, absolutely saw um or thought like every idea was awesome to be in charge of handing out money to make things, because all of our favorite gaming companies would go bankrupt instantly. You want somebody very critical at the top of these. You want somebody who's going to manage those funds in a way that uh, is going to mitigate risks. Take the right
yeah,
risks, hopefully, but mitigate just anybody with any idea. Oh yeah, no, that's awesome. Let's go. I'm gonna give you an art department and all this stuff. Um,
yeah. There's just not enough Shuhei Yoshida unicorns in the industry.
There's not enough Hideo Kojimas to say no.
Yeah,
That's not how it's supposed to work.
But even
Let's
then, I
fix
would
that.
argue, okay, so my introduction to the Metal Gear Solid series was on the original PlayStation. That
Mine too.
game is why I bought my original PlayStation. I've got a lot of younger brothers, so we got a Nintendo 64 because four of us could play at the same time. And then my brother and I bought a PlayStation 1. He bought it for Final Fantasy 7, which is a great game. It's not my favorite Final Fantasy, but it's a great game. And I wanted it for Metal Gear Solid. Neither of us were disappointed. Love Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid 2 comes on the PS2. Great game. I'm pretty bummed out that I have to play as Raiden, but pretty great game.
Everyone was.
And then Snake Eater, I actually got on my original Xbox. And Snake Eater is probably my favorite Metal Gear game of all time, because now you feel like James Bond with a Snake Eater theme song when you're climbing up the ladder and you're crawling through the woods. Like, that game was awesome. And then you realize at the end, it's been out long enough. If you haven't played it, spoiler alert, but you're actually Big Boss. And I don't know why that didn't occur in my head, because this is like back in the 60s or early 70s, and I was playing Snake in the
In the
I
90s.
guess the 90s. And it never occurred to me. So that was like a oh my god moment. Like, it was awesome. And then Metal Gear Solid 4 comes out. And somebody should have told Hideo Kojima that it is a bad idea to have 20 minutes of gameplay followed by a 1.5 hour cutscene, and then 20 minutes of gameplay followed by a 1.5. Like, there
Even though
are
you can skip them.
you can skip them, but it's a Metal Gear. Like,
You
Come
won't know
on,
what's going
tighten
on.
that up. You don't want to skip a Metal Gear Solid cutscene. So tighten it up, Hideo, and let me play more.
Right.
That's
But
the
at
thing. I
least
mean,
but at least the
Kojima's not
mechanics
just a
were the same.
gamer; he's also an auteur, which gets in the way of being a gamer because he's so invested in the creative that he forgets about the actual gameplay sometimes.
Exactly. And that is the difference between, like, video games are absolutely an interactive art form, but video games from big studios, it is commercial art. And it needs to be
Yeah.
marketable. Because you go, like, again, I've worked in film for a long time. You go to a film festival and it's full of very creative films that nobody would ever pay a cent to see.
Yeah.
And then you go to the movie theater and you're like, oh, another Star Wars movie, but it makes money. So are we, as consumers of video games, consumers of this media content, are we part of the problem? If we're
Well, as I
talking
said
about lack
before
of
about the
creativity.
training of the audience, so
Yeah.
possibly yes, to a certain extent. It's a
Well,
little bit chicken and egg, though.
well, you have to think what is being offered and who is offering it and who is buying it. I mean, I know that's very broad, that's very vague, but it's not like, we as the consumer are the ones who are making the games. Now, there are some people who are the consumer and the creator at the same time. They're like, okay, I like video games. I learned how to program them. I'm gonna go learn how to do this, and then they start doing it. But most of us are not like that. We are the consumer of the games, and we're only able to buy what is offered, or we can reject what is offered because it isn't good. It hasn't. And as I showed Mike earlier, I haven't even played this yet. I picked it up only for $5, but I've been told that this is absolute tripe.
I tried it. I really did try. I wanted to see if I could find the diamond in the rough
Yeah,
because I
and that's
love
why I got it for
Nightwing.
$5. I'm like, yeah,
I
why
love
not?
Nightwing, and I played that game. I must have knocked about somewhere in the region about 15, maybe 20 hours into it. I couldn't. I just couldn't.
And that's why it's going
It
to
was
stay in the wrapper.
stilted. The animation was weird. The city felt empty. When you were literally going faster on your motorcycle, you weren't actually going any faster. There was just a blur effect at the edge of the screen. No, just no. And there was a couple of games I played last year, or was it this year? And there was like that. Just I got into them and I tried to play them, and I thought, no, I think the internet's just been too internety. I'll give them a go. I'll see for myself, and I wished I hadn't bothered. It's that, and it's that reboot of Saints Row. Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Kuya brings up a good point, and this is what I was talking about earlier. And that's why, like, the Blair Witch Project was a small indie film, and then it became huge. And then people, like, I'll be completely honest. Even back when it first came out, I didn't like it. I don't like and Cloverfield, I didn't like that either. I don't like movies that try to make me throw up in the theater. But
Blair Witch Project. I got to see that for free. My friend took me, and I still felt like my money was wasted.
but that doesn't change the fact that it was something unique, independently made, and it blew up. It became a phenomenon when it came out, and that's where you get, and I would call this the example of those indie games like Among Us, which then exploded because YouTubers were playing it during the pandemic. Minecraft, which exploded it because YouTube has helped a lot of indie games.
It really has.
But and absolutely, and that's where your innovations come from, and then it's almost the role of AAA games to just refine and make more beautiful those breakthroughs from, at least game mechanic breakthroughs, from other publishers, smaller publishers, because they can afford to take the risks.
So it's kind of like taking a garage band and then signing them to a contract working with the band. They bring out their album. The album's like all fancy schmancy with beautiful DTS sound and da 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 da, and the artwork and all the rest of it. And then there's a tour and everything. And the band, by the end of the tour after the first album, is still the same band as what was in the garage, but also isn't. It's almost, creatively speaking, a ship of Theseus.
So taking that example, I would say what you get is you get like that band will always be that band. They'll still have the songs that they made in the garage, and if they're popular enough and they strike a chord, they're going to resonate. But what you have is an entire industry. If these guys blow up, like you're talking from the garage, so let's say Nirvana, you now have an entire industry saying, okay, what about them caused them to blow up? Because I want to replicate it. So it doesn't necessarily it does in a roundabout way, but it doesn't necessarily affect the original band as much as it makes everything else follow that lead, because everybody's always looking for the next big thing. They're just not willing to take the risk on the next big thing. When Nirvana first signed, they didn't sign a big massive contract. They signed a low budget one, and it was good on whoever they signed with that they took a chance on them, but it was a low budget chance. Elvis was a low budget chance. You look at like even Star Wars, like going back to the film, Star Wars was a low budget chance. Sylvester Stallone had to fight to make Rocky, and had to fight that he would even be a part of it.
Hell, he had to
Because-
fight to be on Death Race 2000.
Well, I mean, they can't all be winners.
Oh yes.
Well, but to your point though, I mean, if with band analogies, I've kind of looked at U2 and Metallica the same way. You know,
I was going to mention Metallica. You're right. Go ahead. Sorry. Doctor.
but that's exactly it. Now Iron Maiden, not so much. I mean, they're like the last couple of albums. I'm like, but and after Saint Anger came out, because Saint Anger was really bad, but I liked Death Magnetic. I liked I can't remember the name of the other one. Now the one that just came out here a couple years ago, or within the last couple of years, the 72 Seasons. And there's a couple good songs on there, but they're not in the same place. And I think that a lot of these game developers, I think the same thing also happens, because you used to have people who were there for the games and not for, as Critical Drinker would say, the message. And a lot of that happened with Halo Infinite. And that wasn't so much the message. That's what's going on now with Halo. You have a bunch of people who are there to try to, they're not even game developers. They're
trying to tick boxes.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of them. They're just activists now. When they changed 343 to whatever they call it, Halo Studios now, all the people running it, they're all activists. I will have nothing to do with that. This was bad enough, especially when, and I've hammered this home. I make fun of it on my channel all the time. Bonnie Ross outright lied to us. We are going to have couch co-op. We realized that you needed couch co-op because of Halo 5. We know where we went wrong. We know that Halo's supposed to be about Master Chief. Well, they did that okay, but no couch co-op. And they said, well, and there's a hack you can do to actually make couch co-op work. I don't know what that hack is. I'm not going to do it. But Microsoft, if they wanted to make a bunch of people happy right now, they would say, hey, we're going to spend a couple $100,000, whatever it is. We know it's in the code here. We're going to fix it. We're going to give you what we actually for real promised. They don't care. So what you started off with Macsoft, and then when Microsoft bought Halo and they bought Macsoft so they could create Halo and make it their launch title for the original Xbox, and people were like, and the game continued. What they have now, this is corrupt. this is, and I don't mean corrupt in in the political sense. I mean this is not what we originally signed on for.
Yeah,
It's
but
moved
the
away from the original
developers
vision.
realized, yeah, the developers realized that gamers don't have friends. They don't need couch co-op.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's the same thing with like I said with U2 and Metallica. It's not what we originally signed on for, and it's okay to. I hate to use the word grow. It's okay to grow as a band or as a developer or as a game, but you can't lose sight of who you are because we're eventually going to go out of here. I got something better to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need, if you want to continue the music analogy further, is more games to take a Linkin Park approach than to take a Ramones approach.
That's a good.
so I'm gonna. So we're about 10 minutes left in the show here. I am going to read Poe's comment here. We can make a little comment on that, and then Retro Bliss has got my wrap up question. So,
Yeah. By the way,
oh,
comment section, I would respond to your comments, but on my phone, which I'm on right now, your comments are I can't read them. Sorry.
so I'll read this one. The problem is that all the newest consoles are all the same now, which in reality they are PCs with custom software.
Absolutely.
No new wow factor really anymore. You always get a handful of great games and a bunch of meh games. And yeah, I mean the last console to really kind of have that wow factor, I think was probably the Switch, simply because it was different.
Mhm.
The Wii had the wow factor.
That's
Obviously, that
Nintendo's MO. We're always different.
we're always different, right? Now, I would agree that there was certainly wow factor with the original PlayStation, especially like I had no interest in the PlayStation, but when they came out, like Nintendo came out with, oh, you've got an analog joystick, and people realize, oh my goodness, this is how we do 3D now. And PlayStation brilliantly added that second thumbstick, and it was complete. Now,
Mhm.
I think Xbox then perfected it by offsetting them. I know Zen disagrees, but I like the offset sticks. That's the only reason I prefer Xbox to PlayStation. It's not
Yeah. I mean, if you could give me an
loyalty thing.
Xbox controller with symmetrical sticks, I'd probably actually try to get the money together for an Xbox.
Well,
Because I've always wanted one, but I've always been put off by that controller.
they do exist. They do exist, and you can get
The
third-party.
They're
third-party,
aftermarket ones, yeah, the
third-party
third-party ones.
controllers.
But my one of my problems is like I've got big hands, right? And so when I have the PlayStation controllers, it was awesome when they first came out. It's like, oh my god, this is the future of gaming. But when the off, but like if especially if your thumb starts to slide and you're playing with the balls of your thumb, my thumbs hit each other and then my thumb will fall off the stick and I'll die. And it's like, ah. So the offset sticks really help.
It's a good job you never got hold of a Japanese PlayStation, because that controller's actually 12% smaller. Or something in that region. I'll forget the actual percentage, but in that ballpark.
But in terms of let's kind of specifically, because Nintendo is a weird outlier, and always has been, or at least since the mid '90s has been. There was like with PlayStation and Xbox, every generation has been here's for more or less PlayStation. I love the fact that they had with the PS4, they came out with the VR. When the Wii did its thing, everybody tried to follow it with cameras and motion controls and all that stuff. Let's forget that. Each new console generation is here's the same, but more powerful. Here's the same, but more powerful.
The
And so,
last two generations have especially been that.
yes. And now even the Switch is doing that with the Switch 2. It's just a bigger Switch. What are your thoughts on that console innovation? Then we'll go to our last question here.
I think the console innovation with being more powerful, more pretty, better cooling, and so on and so forth is good for the stabilization of the platforms themselves. The makers of the games know what they're doing because they know what they've got to work with. They understand the walled gardens they're in, and they know how much power they can squeeze out. but it would be nice to see a bit more differentiation between the different machines. So then there'd be a reason to buy an Xbox, a reason to buy a PlayStation, a reason to buy a Nintendo, other
Yeah.
than just
Like
brand
I said,
loyalty.
Yeah.
it's not even brand loyalty for me. If PlayStation had this controller, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care if it's an
Yeah, but
Xbox or a PlayStation.
you and me, Mike, I mean, and other people in this space, other YouTube gaming content creators, whether you be a retro channel, a gaming culture channel like me, or a collector channel like, say, OG Duffy or Generation Pixel, or whatever other kind of gaming YouTube content you be, whether you be like a Minecraft guy, the fact of the matter is, we're deeply embedded. What we have to remember in discussions like this is the general gaming consumer public. It's in subtle layers. You get guys who are hardcore. You get guys that may play their games 2 or 3 times a week. You get some people who like play every once in a while. You get some people who only ever play one game.
Yep.
And they're not like an esports person who have to delve into that one game and become like the best who ever was, Ash Ketchum special. They're like just a bloke that plays a bit of FIFA after work, and sometimes his
Yep.
girlfriend tells him to turn it off, and everything in between. So we as content creators have to be able to speak to those various different swaths of gamers and mold our content in such a way where it's accessible to all of them.
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, way back in the day, when you had Atari and Intellivision and yeah, Wayne and
Little
Garth.
Wayne's World.
Oh
yeah.
When there were a lot of games, especially like I would say, especially from Activision, because they were the third party who was saying, okay, well, we're going to put Pitfall on 2600. Now we're going to put Pitfall on Intellivision.
They were the first third-party publisher.
They were. Yeah. And so I think that in a way, insidiously, that's where it kind of started. And you started to see, every once in a while, you had Nintendo and you had Sega. They had their exclusives because, they developed their own games, and there were plenty of third-party developers. And then you had the bright idea of some third-party developer. Well, you know what? I'm going to make Aladdin for this console and for that console, and they would both be ever so slightly different. And there would always be, the outliers of people going, well, I prefer this one versus that one. But the general public is like, well, I like the Genesis version of that game versus the one for the Super Nintendo. But then once you got to, I'd say probably closer to between the sixth and seventh generation, the line started to get blurred, and you started to have, well, I don't have it here on the desk, but you had the same game. Well, like this one, I remember this one being on PS3 and on Xbox 360.
Yep.
And the unfortunate thing there is you can't switch your triggers on the PS3. That's why I didn't like the PS3 version. It was, to shoot, you had to use the bumpers, and I was like, well, this is just unnatural. I've got triggers down here. But now with the modern consoles, and Xboxes, they're almost saying it themselves that we are building the same hardware with, like you said, with a different UI. So the exclusivity doesn't need to be there. Sony's not saying that. Nintendo's not saying that. Xbox is still pretending that they have something to offer everybody, but I don't think they do anymore, because if they're going to start offering their IPs across the board to every console, then
now, why would you buy that hardware?
Why would I buy that hardware? So, when the Evercade came out, I said, now there's the potential right there to start seeing something other than Nintendo, who is always, my tertiary console. There's something right there that you might actually start seeing something where they might have somebody develop something exclusively for the Evercade. Atari is still kind of doing that. Yeah, you can play that same Atari game on all modern consoles, but Atari is not building all these great, big, huge, gigantic games. And some of their stuff is, like the new Breakout that came out. I haven't even seen a trailer for it, to be honest. And a friend of the channel, Perry Fractic,
The new Breakout does look awesome.
I will have to have a look.
And for people who have the bingo card, Breakout was supposed to be an Amico release.
Yeah, and
Oh, the much fated Tommy Tellerico machine.
Don't. We won't go down that road. That
Yeah,
was
let's
just
not-
for the bingo card, guys.
But Perry Fractic offered to his channel members. He said Atari gave him a few copies of the Breakout, and I almost went out, but I said no, that's okay. I haven't seen a trailer, so I like.
It does look awesome.
Yars Recharged, I thought, was fantastic. Atari is still doing something unique, whereas
Atari, though, I would consider Atari as well as I'm forgetting the name of the studio that's been making all these recharge games.
Oh yeah,
they're great, and they made the Atari 50. But anyhow, Atari, I still think falls under that indie title. They don't make anything AAA. That doesn't.
No, they don't make anything AAA. They're not making the great big. Huge
they are great
games.
though. They're great, but and they add some originality to the original games.
Well, because they, like Nintendo, they're speaking to their audience.
Exactly.
And like you said, and they may be tapping somebody else on the shoulder to go, hey, make this game for us, and this is what we want to do. But it's still their IP, their idea, and they're speaking to their audience. And now by them going out and buying up all these other smaller IPs, they're making their audience bigger.
If they do something with them.
If they do something with them. I think they eventually will.
Digital Eclipse.
Digital Eclipse, yep.
So, last question of the night, and I appreciate both of you guys coming on. And Zen, you were an extra special surprise. Retro Bliss Gaming says, "What's the fix to get out of the rut?" And I'll start, and we'll move through here. I am going to say, I don't think there is one. I agree that there's a rut, but I don't think it even needs a fix, because this has happened so many times in the history of gaming. You kind of get to think, and then somebody creates something new. I do think that is going to come from the indie scene, or at least a smaller publisher. I don't think that's going to come from the AAA, but it will be adopted by the AAA. And that is, I think, the way things kind of work now. That's my personal opinion.
I would like to see the fix be Sega. I really would love to see the Sega come out of the ashes. Now, I know that they make games and stuff still, and they've got a lot of stuff going on, and that they're, and they're not in the ashes because their parent company, their IPs are used on casino games and stuff.
Yeah,
like
they're
that.
A software company now,
right? They're a software company, but
you want Sega to come out with a new console?
I would love to see Sega come out with a new console, and it's never going to happen, but I love to see them come up with a new console and go, okay, we're doing physical like we always did physical, and screw all these other guys, and we're going to be doing games the way they should be being done, and we will have third parties on here and exclusive third party games, and screw all you other guys. And
I hate to burst your bubble here, but you got more chance to see it at Dreamcast Mini.
Yeah.
I was about to say, you can dream, Scott. You can dream.
Yeah, and it is a pipe dream, but I think realistically it's going to go the same way that you said, Mike. Or I think that you're going to start seeing some IPs or major IPs being sold off for Microsoft. They're not broke by any means. They're a $1 trillion company, but Microsoft has lost their way. They bought up all these giant companies, and there's no way to sustain it. So I think somebody's either going to have to go bankrupt or drop out or something. I don't know, but I think that there will be some kind of innovation, like you said, but I don't know what that's going to be.
For me, this situation, basically, it's like the start of a mosh pit. You have a whole bunch of situations on the edge. The circle's trying to get started. And there's one guy in the middle, he's flailing his arms, and there's a bunch of people who are trying to jump in and they're not ready. You've got CEOs who are taking far too much money, and that money is not going into the companies to make the companies actually create things. And the money is being siphoned towards the top end when it needs to be more evenly distributed. You've got games coming out with trailers that are incredibly expensive 2, 3, 4, 5 years before the game is even ready for prime time. You've got a media industry that can't really say anything, because if it says anything, even remotely negative or perceived to be negative, then they get blacklisted. You have some YouTube creators who basically come out and try and talk about video games, and then they get their content pulled for content violations, even though it's their own content and their own words, especially when it comes to Nintendo. So there's no one clean fix. There's no one operation that'll go, this thing here solves all. It's a confluence of factors. There's many different things. And basically what you end up with is a mosh pit. You end up with a few guys throwing elbows. You've got a few guys bouncing off each other. Some people are trying to crowd surf over the top. And eventually you'll end up with a cohesive pit going round in a circle nicely and like at high speed with frantic activity and all the excitement and all the joy. And then everybody's satisfied, gets on the bus and goes home from their gig. But I mean, yeah, like I say, it's not going to be one solution. It's going to be a series of micro solutions that come together as a greater whole, and hopefully we can consolidate that, and then from that point drive the evolution of the industry into new forms of gameplay, into new ideas, possibly even new ways of controlling games that are outlandish, like heated controllers and moldable controllers, all that silly stuff. Most of the time when we have a controller, all we want is battery life and buttons that don't fail and sticks that don't drift.
Yep.
You have to use your hands? That's a baby game.
What we really want, I think we can all agree, what we really want is a holodeck. But Mr. Postile has it right here. Labo 2 is the fix. Labo 2.
Labo 2.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being on. I'm going to run our little extra here. It runs for like a minute and a half. Stick around so that we can do a little wrap in the green room there. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for chatting with me. For you guys in the chat, thanks for joining us. There you go. Zenbloke was a great addition tonight.
Yes, and thank you for popping in.
And is a holodeck technically retro? I think it might be. It's I first saw a holodeck in, what was it, 1987? Next Generation came out.
In fact, if you get right down to it, the holodeck goes all the way back to the Star Trek animated series that came after the original series.
Oh, you know what? I've watched the animated series. I don't remember it much.
It's called the Rec Room in that, but it is holographic. In fact, if anything, in Star Trek Enterprise, in the second season, they have an interaction with an alien species who has a holodeck, and that's where it's often speculated that's where the holodeck technology comes from.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I remember it from Next Generation with the yellow tape on the black background. So I'm going to stick with that in my head canon. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for joining me, guys. And we'll see you next week on the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. We're going to be talking about our top 5 consoles of all time. I know Dr. Scott's going to be with us.
Yes.
And my list may surprise you. Whereas Zenbloke's list, he's probably thinking in his head right now, well, there's been 5 PlayStations.
I'm not that predictable.
Anyhow, thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week.